focusing this evening on humorous speaking and on table topics. Our first event will be about humorous speaking. We are very fortunate to have with us this evening Mickel, who is the 2012 District 29 champion, and we have with us the 2009 District 27 champion, Edmond. So let me tell you just a little bit about them. Annie is a career transition counselor. She retired as a master sergeant from the Army, and she now works for Inverness Technology. She's been with Toastmasters 10, 11 years approximately. And it turns out Edmond has been with Toastmasters sort of 10 or 11 years. He was a past Area Governor of the Year in the Big 27, and he was a Division Governor of the Year in the smaller district, Division 29, if I'm recalling correctly. So they are here this evening. They will be speaking, and they'll be doing a panel, and we'll do a Q&A session afterwards. So any burning questions you have, make a note so we don't miss them. May I introduce to you first, Distinguished Toastmaster Edmond.
Earlier this evening, Diane had asked for people to raise their hands if you're interested in participating in the humorous speech contest. I'd like to change that question around just a little bit. How many folks in here actually have participated as a contestant in the humorous speech contest in the club, area, division, or district level? And for those that raise their hand, what are some one-word descriptions about your experience? Fun.
Lost.
Lost. Your icebreaker. Let me ask another question. For those of you that have not raised their hands, how many of you are scared to death of participating in a humorous speech contest? That was me. And Danny too. For those of you that have not shared my background, it took me 6 months as a Toastmasters before I gave my icebreaker speech. It took me 7 years as a Toastmasters before I gave my first speech outside my club. It took me 7 years before I had enough courage to be a contestant in any contest. You see, during my time, my first 7 years at Toastmasters, I had no desire to participate as a contestant. I could be a contest master, I could be a judge, I could be a timer, I could be a sergeant at arms, but not the contestant. I wasn't in Toastmasters to be a contestant. That's not me. I was there to improve my speaking skills. But so I thought. It turns out that a phone call, an innocuous phone call from my area governor asking our club, when is our club speech contest? That got us going, because I was the VPE of my club. And the last thing I wanted to do was to not have a contest. Right, Jim? It's the worst thing. So I'm asking every club member, please consider being a contestant. I asked every person in our club. We had 4 people that actually said, yes, I'll be a contestant. Well, I figured that I might as well lead by example too. I'll just throw my name in the hat. Our club contest was the following week. But then what am I going to say? What's my speech going to be about? Well, what I did was I pulled out an old speech from a few years ago that wasn't even meant to be humorous. And I changed it around a little bit, and lo and behold, I won the club contest. And then I had to go to the area contest. And believe it or not, that was my very first speech outside my club. I had to be there. And was I nervous? You bet I was nervous. I happened to win that contest and go to the division contest. And I heard all those great speeches. And I thought to myself, what am I doing here? But I won that one. And then I went to the district contest. And at that time, it was District 27, a huge district with 10 divisions. So if you can imagine being on the big stage with 9 other contestants, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't belong here. Why am I here? But I'm here to tell you that anybody can win. I wasn't there to win a trophy. I wasn't there to compete. I just had a great story to tell. And so tonight I'd like to share with you 3 tips on a successful humorous speech. The first one is to be a storyteller. Everybody has a story to tell. And everybody loves stories. Think back when you were this tall. Probably asked your mom or your dad to tell you a story. And why is that? We love stories. It takes us on a journey. You go from point A to point B. And with any stories or any good movies, there's always some sort of a conflict that helps you weave and turn and enjoy that journey. So as you tell that story, make sure or have the story such that people can understand it, that it has a wide appeal to everybody. Because if you think of yourself as being in the audience for a humorous speech contest, what are some of the qualities that you would be expecting? What are some of those qualities that you would be expecting if you were in the audience for a speech contest? Funny? Entertaining? Sorry. What are some? Yes? I'm sorry? Okay.
Cleverness.
Fun. Right. So all those qualities, make sure it's in your speech. Because everyone wants you, first of all, everyone wants you to succeed. But also everyone wants to be taken on a journey. And as you tell your story, invite that audience to see what you see and smell what you smell and feel what you feel. Take them on a journey, and as you go through those twists and turns and things that are funny, the audience will laugh with you. And in my speech, the speech that I'd given in 2009, I told the story of living life with the last name of Joe. And in telling that story, it was very easy for me because it's my story. And a lot of things in there are my experiences. But as you tell those stories, use a lot of those features that are highlighted in your competent communicator manual. For instance, using vocal variety, using organization of your speech, using short words. All that comes into play as you tell your story because you want to make sure that the audience is traveling with you on that journey. The second tip for a successful humorous speech is to be authentic. Be authentic. How many people in this room want to be duped? Nobody. And as you're coming up here on stage and are giving a humorous speech, everyone wants to believe that the story you're telling is true. They want to believe that whatever trials and tribulations that you're going through is true. Nobody wants to be duped. Nobody wants to go and listen to a story that they can immediately tell that was made up, especially for a humorous speech contest. And as far as being authentic, again, using my speech of living life lasting with Joe, you can pretty much tell that when you look at the program and you see that my last name is Joe, chances are pretty good that my story is going to be authentic. But certainly, if my last name was Lapkowski, and I got up here to talk about my last name being Joe, I've already passed that threshold. No one's going to believe me. And the audience, most likely, are going to think one of three things. One is, what is that red light going to start? Or two, boy, this chair is uncomfortable, isn't it? Or three, what's for dinner tonight? Because once the audience detects that your story is not authentic, then you've already lost the audience. Because in a humorous speech, it's going to be one of the most difficult speeches you've ever given. Not only do you have to capture everyone's attention for 5 to 7 minutes, but you got to make them laugh. And when you're up here, the last thing you want to do is to fall flat on your face. And that was my motivation. I certainly did not want to fall flat on my face in front of 50, 100, 200 people. And for being authentic, if I gave a speech that was about Snowmageddon, most people in here remember the big snow a few years ago, and if I gave a speech about that, I think everyone can identify with anything that I'm going to say. And even if your speech does not have a shred of truth in it, change your story up just so that the audience thinks, well, maybe that is true. It could happen. But if the story is about Snowmageddon in the year 1776, then you've already lost the audience. So, second tip is to be authentic. The third tip on a successful humorous speech is to be memorable. And being memorable is tough. But it's also the most creative part of that speech. In telling a story, tip number one, it's about the delivery of the speech. Tip number two about being authentic is the content of the speech. Tip number three of being memorable, it's a mixture of both content and delivery. With being memorable, you have all sorts of tools that you can use to make your speech memorable. You can certainly use vocal variety. You can use content. You can use choice of words. You can use repeat of words or phrases. You can use props. Anything there is available to you to use. You just have to design what it is to make it memorable. When I look back at the year 2009, and that experience, one of the things that allowed me to do in 2010, 2011, 2012 is to be able to listen to the humorous speeches at the district level in both District 27 and 29. And every one of those winners shared these three qualities. They told a story, it was authentic, and it was memorable. Now those three tips can be applied to any other speeches, but it very much is applicable to a humorous speech. One of the things that you hear from time to time in a speech is the use of acronyms and how we make certain words and the plea to remember this word, right? Well, I have no shame tonight. I'm going to use exactly the same thing. Be a storyteller, be authentic, be memorable. S-A-M, Sam. My good friend Sam Connor's not here tonight. He'd be pleased that I'm naming something after him. But those three qualities will help with a successful humorous speech. Now with a humorous speech, there is no recipe for success. But in listening to the other speeches in 2010, 2011, 2012, it all trended toward those three qualities. And so with that, I think that there is, even at a very high level, there is that little piece of recipe for success. And it's interesting too, because when I think back at folks that didn't win, many times they weren't telling a story, or they weren't authentic, or certainly not memorable. So those three, and one of those three, or all those three, didn't quite match. And success wasn't there. Now, I do have to say that going into humorous speech, my goal was not to win a trophy. My goal was just to stand up in the audience, or stand up on stage, and tell a story. My story. And by sheer luck, it worked. And that's my advice to you is not only use those three tips, but there is one other tip that I didn't mention, and that is purely for the reason that it didn't go well with SAM, and it's to have fun. Diane made a mention of simply have fun. During a humorous speech contest, get up there, you have a story to tell it, and simply have fun. One of the things that I learned from my 3-month experience in 2009 is that I learned as much about public speaking in going through the club, area, division, district contest as I did those first 7 years of my time in Toastmasters. So given that as an example, don't repeat what I did. Go ahead and participate in the humorous speech contest. You'll be glad that you did. You'll realize that the fact that you were participating as a contestant means that you're already a winner. Thank you so much. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the current District 29 Humorous Speech Champion.
Duck goes into the bar. He says, bartender, do you have any grapes? The bartender says, no, I don't have any grapes. He goes out. He comes back the next day. He says, bartender, do you have any grapes? The bartender says, no, I don't have any grapes. He goes out. He comes back the next day. He says, bartender, do you have any grapes? The bartender says, no, I don't have any grapes. And if you come in here asking me about grapes again, I'm going to nail your beaks to the wall. He goes out. He comes back the next day. He says, bartender, do you have any nails? The bartender says, no, I don't have any nails. So he said, do you have any grapes? My fellow Toastmasters and guests, what makes a humorous speech? You have to have an original story. Your story. We all have stories. We all have something that happened to us. As a matter of fact, sometimes when you talk with someone, you will say, let me tell you what happened to me. You all have to have a story, an original story, something that happened to you personally. The reason why my story was interesting, probably to most, is because I'm a retired soldier from the 19th Army. Stuff happens to us. I have a lot of stories, and I thought about my career over 23 years, and I thought, what can I tell them that's going to be interesting? And so I thought about the time that I was a soldier way back when, in 1980, when I was a young soldier. I was like a private Benjamin, and I didn't know the rules of the military. So I started volunteering for stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not what you do. You don't volunteer for stuff. And so I took what happened to me in the military and turned it into a story. My story. It was an original story about what happened to me. Just happened to turn out to be funny. Now I'll tell you on my side of it, it wasn't funny. It was not funny. Going to the field, sleeping in a tent on the ground. It wasn't funny. But to people that didn't go through what I went through when I started telling you my story, you thought, wow, that's funny. That's interesting. You all have stories. You all can be in a contest because you all have a story, and your story is funny. So that's the first point, a humorous story about yourself, an original story. The second is, like Joe said, you have to have multiple varieties. And I told you that joke about the duck because I wanted you to hear me tell a joke, you hear my voice go up and down. You have to have vocal variety. You can't stay at one tone. You can't stay so low, you can't go so high. You have to be clear enough so everyone can hear you all the way at the back of the room. And I'll tell you this, if you're doing a speech and you look at the back of the room and the person at the back of the room is doing like this, you're not loud enough. So you got to turn that volume up. And Toastmasters taught me that. Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, I used to be shy. I didn't used to be able to do this. I was very shy, and when my grandmother used to come to visit me, I would go in the back room. I didn't even want to go see grandma. I didn't want to go see my uncles and aunts because I was so shy. And I knew that in Toastmasters, that would help me get over my shyness. So I joined Toastmasters so that way I could speak out and speak up so that the lady in the back of the room can hear me talking very loudly. Can you hear me, ma'am? Very good, very good. You have to be able to take your inner voice and turn it up. You have to be able to speak loud enough so everyone can hear you and also clear enough. And you have to practice. If you don't think you're pronunciating the words correctly, practice in front of your friends. Ask your friends and your fellow Toastmasters if they understand you clearly, so that way, if they understand you, then the audience can understand you. The other thing you have to do, my third point, and I'm going to be brief, is gestures. We practice gestures at my Toastmasters Club at Fort Belvoir. We have a game called Gestures. We pull it out every now and then at Toastmasters meeting, and instead of us talking, we use gestures. We pull out a card, and whatever the card says, you have to gesture it. Because in Toastmasters, we talk. We love talking, right? But when you use gestures, your gestures can help your communication. It helps your nonverbal communication. So if I'm trying to get the lady to understand me on the first row, I'll look at her and do this, or give her the head nod, and she knows that I'm trying to get her to understand me. So using gestures is very good. I used gestures in my speech when I did my speech back last year. And one of the things that I did, I wanted to let the audience know, as part of my speech, is that I sat down. So when I was telling someone that I sat down, what did I do? I did like that to say I sat down. But I didn't sit all the way down because I got to stay up to let everybody see me. I also, in my speech, it was funny, but there was an emotional time in my speech when I talked about, if you wasn't there was an ant that got stuck in my ear. So I wasn't smiling. I was frowning when I told the audience there was an ant that was stuck in my ear. And the medic pulled the ant out and said, just calm down, soldier, it's just an ant. He's telling me to calm down, and I'm looking at him like, you're crazy. I'm not going to calm down with a live ant in my ear. Are you serious? But you have to take your memories, things that happened about you, and turn them into a story. My story was only 5 minutes long, but it lasted 23 years, and I just rolled it all up in one to make it my story. Think about the stories that have happened in your life, and you can turn them into a story. I'll give you a story that actually happened to me when I was a little girl. One of the things that I was supposed to do every Saturday is I was supposed to take my hair loose, and I had long braids, take my hair loose, wash it, dry it, and get it prepared for my mother when she came home on Saturday afternoon so she could press it to get me ready for church on Sunday. I was supposed to get all that ready. Well, you know what happened? I played and had to be ready at 3 o'clock. I played all the way up until 5 minutes to 3. It's 5 minutes to 3! Running home. I gotta get home and I gotta get the fire on the stove ready to heat the water so I can wash my hair, blow it dry so she can press my hair. You can't do that in 5 minutes, can you? No, you can't. But I ran home and got there and opened the fire top. The fire was gone out. So what do? How do I get this fire going quickly? How do I do that? Well, if you're down south and you have kerosene, you pour it on the fire and it'll start fast, right? So I got all my hair loose. Okay, you with me, aren't you? I got all my hair loose. And I leaned over and poured the kerosene into the stove. And what happened? It said, poof. And I came back up like Buzz Bunny. I went, poof. All the hair on my nostrils, my eyelash, and all the front of my hair was gone. So I just stood there thinking, okay, now what? What am I going to do? As soon as it happened, my mother walked in and saw me. went, as they say now, the young people say, OMG. My child just almost burnt herself up. Now, you would think that a mother would come to me and scold me. She went right past me. And she went into her bedroom and she got on her knees and she said, thank the Lord you didn't burn her up this time. This time. I said this time, ma'am, because I set the house on fire twice. I have some stories. Think about the stories that you have. Think about things that happened to you in your childhood. Think about stories that happened to you at work. And sum it all up and make it into a story. And make it funny. Think about things that you did in high school. Think about that first date that you got all ready for. You put on your nice dress, you got your hair made, you got the corsage on, and you were standing there waiting at the door for him to pick you up and, oh wait a minute, I'm sorry, that was me, I'm sorry. That was me. Think about your stories. Think about things that has happened to you and put them into a story. Because I know you all have stories, yes? And you can all wound it all up, make it nice and neat and package it. And keep this in mind. If you want the audience to laugh with you, smile. If it's funny, smile too. If it's sad, frown. Use your facial expression. Use your gestures. Use your vocal variety. And think about those stories that happened to you. So it's an original story, and so it'll be memorable, as Joe said, my fellow Toastmasters.
Well, we have been fortunate to hear two marvelous speeches to prepare us for the Humorous Speech Contest. Excellent job. Let's give them another round. I've been so fortunate to actually heard them in competition. They were really great speeches. So you've gotten tips from the mouths of successful contestants. Now we're going to have a quick we're going to have a Q&A panel. This is an ideal time for you to ask them questions about humorous speaking, about their experience in competition. If there was anything they said, geez, I'd like to know a little bit more about that, now is the time to ask. So Edmond and Annie are taking questions. And Johnny, do you want to start, please?
Yes. Something I've often wondered about, in the comedy clubs and in the movies, wild, outlandish, energetic comedy seem to get people really stirred up and make them want to pay their money. But that doesn't work in Toastmasters. Do either of you have any theories as to why those type of wild and outlandish speeches just don't do anything in our competitions?
I'll start. I think, though, in Toastmasters, you have 5 to 7 minutes to give a speech. And I think what Johnny was describing is that a lot of times in comedy clubs, it's set of one-liners, as if you were going to comedy club. And with a comedy club, it's very rare that you have a theme or a story that goes with it. It's always typically a joke after joke after joke after joke. And in my speech, and also I think for Annie's speech, it was a story that developed.
I agree. It's a story that is built, because my story didn't start out as funny. It wasn't funny. As a matter of fact, I think mine started out really sad of things that I was going through to get to that point. And finally just build and build and build. I think my punchline was actually at the very end. I gave you that punchline and everybody thought, wow, that was really fun. But I had to build to that point. It's not like a joke after joke after joke. And you know what I found out today, just as I was on my way here? I teach class over at Fort Belvoir, and I was telling people that I'm in Toastmasters. I had to leave the class early to come here. You know what someone said? What is Toastmasters? So the word is not out that we are here and that we are available to help people. We have to continue to put the word out.
Thank you.
Great question, Johnny. And you are
Amber Jones.
Amber.
That's great. When you're giving a humorous speech and you see negative reactions from the audience instead of laughter, if you have the presence of mind to do anything other than just complete your speech, what would be a good response to that reaction?
I'll start.
I'll tell you when it happened to me.
Okay.
I was giving a speech about the differences, a humorous speech about differences between men and women. And it happened to be mostly men that day, and they told me me later what they were reacting to without speaking on the end. But I didn't know that till later.
Well, actually, I had a similar experience. In my speech, there was one part of my speech where I talk about a period of life in high school. And again, my last name is Joe, and my part of my speech is, and I've heard all those nicknames, G.I. Joe, Average Joe, Cup of Joe, even Sloppy Joe. And that was a punchline, Sloppy Joe. And I expected laughter, and all I got was, oh. Something I didn't expect. But I just kept going, and I didn't react to it, I just kept going. And that was my, I'm sure other people have different reactions or different ways to go around it, but that was mine. I don't know if it happened to you.
I haven't had that happen to me, but if it did, you know what? I would probably change what I was going to say around to fit the audience. And also, if I'm talking to an audience and they're looking at me sour and I'm trying to be funny, I might pick out a person in the audience and start concentrating on that person to try to get that person to smile at me or to see if I can get that person to agree with me, understand? You know, I might pick that person out and say, I'm going to pick on somebody, not pick on you, but try to look around the room and get that feeling of confidence. Yeah, but I would change mine. If it's all men, and I'm talking about men, I'm going to change it up a little bit. Because you don't want eggs on it.
Now, Amber, that was a great question. Thank
Yes.
you. And you are
Ariana.
Ariana?
So is there any, you said talk about a personal story
Yes.
about yourself. Is there anything that you would recommend to stay away from in terms of personal stories or any type of stories we should avoid?
I would. Yeah.
I would stay away from politics, and I would stay away from religion, and I wouldn't say too much about sex.
I perfectly agree with that. It's just like any other Toastmasters club. There's certain topics that it's probably best just to avoid.
And do you find that there's any, with the Toastmasters contest, with the audience, do you find any subjects that are more appealing than others?
I think, though, if you looked at the past winners, there's certain things that are in common. I made a mention of that. But one of the things that has some commonality is that in their story, it all had mass appeal. And it's because not only in the audience, I mean, the audience is certainly listening to your speech, but amongst those audience is also the judges. And you want to make sure, as a contestant, you want to make sure that you have no idea who those judges are, but you want to make sure that your story appeals to them. But I think that the bottom line, though, is it's much like any other Toastmasters club meeting that you're giving a speech. There's certain things you just stay away from, and certain topics you just stay away from. And the other thing, too, just to make a mention, in a humorous speech, make it clean. Right? Don't use the four-letter words, don't use bodily functions, nothing like that.
Like dirt.
Stay away from that. But there's a lot to offer within Toastmasters, and a lot of humor can come out of your speeches without having to go to that level.
This question is
And your name is
Aarti.
Augie?
And this question is for you. Basically, how much time you took to consolidate or to extract 5 to 7 minutes of story from your entire life experience?
How much time did it take? Come on, I'll say one. But now, after I got the speech together, I practiced and I practiced and I practiced. I practiced. One thing I did, that's going to be a tip. I practiced not in front of people. I practiced telling this speech on the telephone to my friends, because I wanted to not let them see me, but hear what I was saying. So I practiced on the telephone with my girlfriend. I gave my whole speech to my girlfriend over the phone and asked for her opinion. Did you think it was funny? Did you think I should change anything? So I did it over the phone on more than one occasion. Still on the phone and to get feedback from them.
So Andy, maybe related to Augie's question about how long to be put together, once you got the foundation for your speech, how much would you say the speech evolved over that month or during the competition?
I say it evolved because, one, I had to get it all written down. I don't do it on the computer, I have to write stuff down. So I wrote it all down within a month. But then after I started practicing, that's when I started fine-tuning it. And then the more I practiced, I realized that I had to add vocal variety in some places. I had to add gestures. And eventually, I would still say in about 30 days, it finally got to be fine-tuned and I could put the paper down. And then I started practicing doing it without the paper to see if I could put it in my memory nowadays.
This is the second time that I've ever met Annie. And believe it or not, our stories and a lot of our responses are very similar. Annie's story was about a lifetime of experience.
Yes.
My story is about a lifetime of experience. And it's not easy to take a lifetime of experience and distill it to 5 to 7 minutes. But my approach was, I wrote my speech down. And I didn't care about how long it was going to take. I wrote it down. And then it was from that practice that I was able to whittle things down so it did meet the 5 to 7 minutes. And one interesting thing, though, the question that Diane asked, how much did your speech change from the club contest to area to division? And I, too, had practiced my speech on the telephone with a good friend of mine. I didn't know that Annie did the same thing. I thought I was the only one that did that. The surprising thing was the person on the other line is a person that I trusted a lot. And she's a great speaker. And she says, Edmond, it's a good speech. Let me see what I can do to help change things around, make it a little bit better. And I trust her. And she gave me her version. And it was completely different. I trusted her. So I said, okay, for the division contest, I'm going to change my speech around. And I tried and I tried and I tried. I tried to memorize the things that she wanted. One of my mentors to say, this is what you should do, this is what you should say. And then when I practiced on my club, there was one comment that this person, I think to this day, doesn't realize that he made a comment to me like this. He said, Edmond, the second speech wasn't as funny as your first speech. That did. I went back to my original speech. And then it goes back to that concept of being authentic, because that was my speech, that was my story. And when you're up here, when I'm up here and I tell my story, I think everyone in the audience can tell, you can see the emotion, you can feel it, that it's something that I don't think this person is making it up. And that's an interesting thing of how all that evolved.
Great question, great answers. And you are?
Bruce Bradley.
Bruce?
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank both of you for coming forward and sharing with us. Your speeches is just like a picture. To watch you perform, it's like it's 1,000 words. I really learned a lot. I really wanted to hear something about your gestures, and you mentioned the gesture game and the native thing, and that was a little bit more, and I appreciate it. But both of you have really great gestures. And we'll speak a little bit on how you were able to develop the gestures and how best to use gestures in your speech.
Well, as I said, there is a game that you can go and buy at one of the game stores. It's called Gestures. And in the game, there's, I don't know, there's probably maybe 500 different cards. And you pull it out, for instance, one will say chair. And you have to gesture to somebody what a chair is. If it says, okay, that's very easy. You gesture, okay. And then the person you're gesturing to has to say, what am I trying to say? Oh, he's trying to say okay. Or if you say, slap me, you have to practice doing gestures so that way when you're giving your speech, if your speech is about a box, you can say a box, you can do this for a box. When you're talking about glasses, you can take your glasses off. When you're talking thinking, you can do this. You have to think about all the different gestures that you can do. So write your speech first. Write your speech first. And then as you're practicing your speech, think about a gesture that can go along with your speech. Because just saying the words is not enough. You got to drive it home with some gestures, with some movement, looking at people. You got to drive it home with moving around and doing the gestures. Maybe you're disgusted. You have to put your hands up. I'm disgusted. I'm mad, something, you gotta make a gesture. If there's something that has to do with noise, I remember part of my speech, there was a rabbit. I don't know if you heard my speech, but there was a rabbit in my speech. And so how do you make the sound of a rabbit coming towards you? So I had to do that in my speech. I had to make those sounds so that I could tell you something was coming towards me. So you have to think about those gestures. Write your speech first, and then think about gestures that you can add to it to make it memorable.
Right, more memorable. In my case, I'm terrible at gestures. And between the division contest and the district contest, I was very fortunate to have 3 very good friends that I used as mentors. And with those mentors, I practiced my speech in front of them. And one of the things that, at least in my experience, once I got to the district level, I mean, this is the final level of the big stage, the speech itself becomes very choreographed. I know that at this point in my speech, I'm standing right here. I know at this point in my speech, I am standing right here. I know that when I see the green light at this point in the speech, I'm safe. It's very choreographed. It's very different than giving a speech at a club, at a Toastmasters club, because you just give a speech and you get an evaluation and see each other again 2 weeks from now. And so with gestures, it was through my mentors that said, Edmond, you should do this. And you should be big, because you want to make sure that people in the back can see you. If you're pointing at your watch, you got to make sure that the person in the back row can see that you're pointing at your watch. So it's very different. It's very unnatural. But it's something that it's quite the experience to come up here and give that humorous speech and make people laugh. And once people start laughing, that's another thing too, is as you're timing your speech, people are going to laugh. And you have to make sure that you allow enough time so that you don't go 7 minutes and 30 seconds. You don't want to be disqualified.
Super question, Bruce, thank you. And you are? Carlos.
Hi, being offered as a tip, but I heard it as something that I think is important to both of you, and that is that there is somewhat of a seriousness to your truth, your story. And I don't see myself as a very funny person. Actually, I'm a very serious person. But people still laugh. And so I thought to myself, well, what is it that makes it real for them, the audience? And I thought it was about timing. And I'm not sure that's something that can be taught. So I'm wondering, 1, do you see yourself as funny people? And then 2, can timing be taught?
I'll start. Do I see myself as a funny person? Sometimes. With my coworkers, I'll crack one-liners here and there, and we'll all laugh and move on in our work lives. But giving a speech is very different, because again, it's 5 to 7 minutes, and you got to develop that speech. But there's one thing that I think maybe Carolyn made a mention of, or somebody made a mention of, is that your tragedy is their comedy. And much like a movie that has a conflict, this is your conflict. And this is your conflict that you're going to take the audience with you so that they experience your conflict and what you're going to do because of that conflict. And as far as timing goes, there's certain points I think that we all have in our speech where we expect people to laugh. We expect people to react to that punchline. And one thing that's very unnatural for me is to let people laugh and give them that time to enjoy it and digest it. And your mind, you're counting Mississippi 1, Mississippi 2, Mississippi 3, then you go on to your next line. And but that's one thing. One other thing to make a mention of. At the district contest, again, there were 10 contestants. I was nervous. I was so nervous that I did not want to hear any other speeches. I actually got up and gave my first few lines, and I froze. I forgot my next line. But I don't think the audience detected it. For me, for me, it was an eternity. What's my next line? What's my next line? And then I went on. And I don't think the audience detected it. As Andy said, the audience just paused.
Timing. I do believe that it can be taught, because as we tell the joke or you tell your story, and you have to wait for the response of the laughter. Because if you keep thinking about the time, then you're going to just keep talking, and then they're going to miss something. So you have to tell your punchline and give them, like you say, 1 minute to 60. Give them time to laugh, and then go to the next part of it. Okay? But also, think about the show, America's Funniest Videos. There's a lot of tragedy in that show if you've watched it. People are falling and all that. What do? We laugh. We laugh. I told you about my fire, my hair get caught on fire. Poof. What you do? You laugh. People laugh at our tragedies. We're not supposed to be trying to be funny, but it just comes out funny. I guess as long as nobody dies, it's okay. So. Oh, of course, right. Yeah, as long as it wasn't me.
Carlos, thank you for your question. Paul, do you have a question?
Sure. You guys are district champs. We heard Jim Call talk about clubs and having club contests and an passion plea that do it, please do it. You guys give back. You're giving back right now by talking to this group. Are there things that can be done to give back from our district champs or the division champs, the area champs, to encourage clubs to have contests and to get engaged in the competition process?
I'll start off with, as far as what do we do to ask people to participate? Just for me, is driving home that message, anybody can win. And again, for my story, I didn't go in there to win a trophy. I went in there because I was scared to death that my area governor was going to show up at my club and we didn't have a club contest. And then I had to go to the area contest. Then I had to go to the division contest. And oh my gosh, I'm going to be at the district contest. I don't belong here. It's okay, I don't care if I'm first or 10. I have a story to tell. What happens, happens. I'm going to get up there on the stage and just tell my story. And hopefully everyone enjoys it. But one of the things that helped me a lot was there were a few club members that followed me at the area contest, at the division contest, and at the district contest. And for that, I'm very grateful for their support because they didn't have to be there. They've heard the story before. They've heard my speech over and over and over again. But it was their support that was very helpful for me.
I would say, again, everybody has a story, and don't be afraid to tell it. As Joe was saying, he was nervous, and so was I. I was very nervous. I can tell you, I was like you. I didn't want to hear anybody else's speeches. I wanted to sit outside until it was my turn and then come in. I was very, very nervous, so we understand if you are nervous, but it still doesn't stop you because you can take that nervous energy and pour it out into your speech. So when you're talking, just take that nervous energy put it back out there in positive energy to make your speech exciting and adventurous. If you say you're excited, then you got to act like you're excited. You got to put that smile on your face and do that speech. And if you want them to laugh, then laugh at yourself as well. Always laugh.
Your name is?
Oh, I'm sorry.
My name is Maria.
What is it?
Maria.
Maria?
I would like to thank you both for your wonderful tips. It was very useful for me and I'm sure for everybody else. I enjoy hearing about the gestures and using the vocal variety. I was wondering if you could address the level of energy a little bit, because it's a hugely important component when you're making a speech. Level of energy. How important is it to be energetic or not be overly energetic? Just a couple of words.
Well, I think it's very, depending on your speech, I think it's very, for my speech, I needed to show energy. I needed to show you that it was mine. I had to own my speech. Like he was saying, his good friend rewrote his speech, changed it around a little bit. And then when he tried to deliver it, he didn't have the energy in it because it wasn't his exact words. So when you deliver a speech, and it's your speech, you'll find out that you will be very passionate about it and you'll have the energy. But keep in mind, if it's a humorous speech, you need to have a lot of energy. You need to have movement and positive gestures all around the room. But if it's a sad speech, you want to tone your energy down because you don't want to look happy when you're supposed to be sad. and there was a lady way back there.
Yes, your name is
Laura.
Laura. Where would you like to?
Yeah, I've been to a number of speech contests, and I find that I keep seeing the same people win. And I mean, I appreciate their speeches, but a lot of times I don't think they're particularly funny. But what I would like is maybe to see some opportunity for people to maybe give presentations that aren't being judged. Could there be a forum where people can give speeches where they don't have to be worried about being judged against other people? I mean, speech contests are fine, but I would like to see more of an opportunity when people can actually branch out.
Well, maybe I can take that question for you. One of the opportunities that you have as a Toastmaster is to visit other clubs. How many of you are a VPE in the room? We have a lot of VPEs in the room. Do you ever have an agenda where you have an open meeting slot, an open speaker slot? It happens all the time. One of the things I would suggest you do is take a look at the other clubs in your area and call them, send a quick message to them and say, hey, I'd like to speak in another club. Would it be possible for me to come to your club meeting? As a Toastmaster, you can go to club meetings anywhere in the world and ask to get on the agenda. So if that's of interest to you, I would suggest that you look at other clubs and reach out to them and say, hey, I'd like to come speak at your club.
I don't mean so much, I'm talking more like an audience member. I keep seeing people come up and they just, leave their heart out there trying to speak, and they're trying to be funny, and most things aren't really humorous. I mean, they're pleasant and you smile, but most things really aren't all that funny. But I would like to see people not be afraid to get out there and not be constantly certain people always winning, and these people, just breaking their heart. And I mean, they never win a show.
Well, that's one of those characteristics of competition. What I always suggest, and I understand your empathy toward these other people. Edmond's story is a great story. Edmond said it took him 7 years to speak outside the club. So the virtue to someone coming to a competition and giving a speech that maybe isn't as funny as the person had hoped it would be is that person has broken the ice. Now I know Carlos and Tony both have competed at the division and the district level, I believe. I know you've done a lot of competition, or probably other people here have competed. The first time I competed in international speech contests, I worked to do this 5 to 7 minute speech. I can't tell you how many hours I put in, a gazillion hours. As I walked into the meeting, the club president says, we don't have enough people in the evaluation speech contest, would you compete? I really don't want to do that. I really want to say, he said, no, we need more. Okay, fine. So I got up to give my speech. It totally bombed. I had that experience that Edmond had where I got up, I froze. It was a god-awful moment, and for me, the next line didn't come soon. And it was like a plane going down. Absolutely awful experience. Awful experience. I went home and I rocked for hours thinking, my God, what were you thinking?
Right.
But I really learned a lot from that experience. So even though it's a little painful to get up and speak, you can go on to do something else. But the other part of that story is I won the evaluation speech contest. And I went on to the area and I won the area and I placed, I don't know, second or third at the division level. And I kept going, who knew that was going to happen, right? So there are gifts in these experiences, and I understand your empathy with it, but if there's anybody here who's afraid of crash and burn, just make sure you got a rocker at home, and when it's over, just kind of rock it and go, hey, what did I learn tonight? And go back out and do it again, because that's how you become funny. So that's a long answer to that
One other
question.
thing too, is if I look at my year in 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, those 4 years, out of those 4 years, 3 of those district winners in District 27 and 29 were folks that no one else had even heard of before. I didn't know anybody. I don't know, Annie didn't know anybody, and George Davidson didn't know anybody. As a matter of fact, when I went up to the registration desk in 2009 to say that I'm here, I'm a contestant, they gave me my name badge.
That's right, Joey.
To my surprise, this was my name
That's
badge.
right. And you used it in the speech.
And I used it in my speech. But everything by that time had already been choreographed and knew exactly what I was going to say. But this was the wrinkle. How am I going to incorporate this? Where am I going to incorporate this into my speech? Well, at the end I did, and I think it just added some additional authenticity. Right. And during the time when all the contestants were on stage getting their certificates and all that, one of the contestants says, "Oh my gosh, it is real." Yeah, it was not planted. It was something that just fell in my lap, and I used it.
Thank you, Evan. We have time for one last question before we go to the next part of our program. One more question? Carlos, anybody else have any first question? No other first questions? Carlos, you're on.
Just to sort of add on to your answer, this is why mentorship is so important. That I'm getting such a kick at the thrill of working with new members for whom English is not their first language. And it's so exciting that now they are winning in their own way and getting that top honor, and you can see the growth. And to me, there lies the fact that we need this.
Yeah, it's very, very exciting to watch that development. Well, Carlos, thank you for a great last comment. Thank you to Edmond and Joe and to Annie Mickel. Did they do an awesome job?